Hello and welcome again to another video. In the previous video, we've taken a look at the move bishop e2. Let me make sure that the moves are getting on the board. Bishop e2, and then short castle, and so on in the previous two chapters. In this chapter, we're basically going to take a look at what happens if white does not play bishop e2. And I have to say that this chapter really confused me a lot because positions were very similar to chapters 1, 2, and 3 and 4 combined. So it I think I figured things out, but I do have to say that it was pretty confusing. Yeah. All right, so which moves are we going to take a look at? Well, what I mentioned, bishop e2 is the move that we've discussed already. I want to make a brief mention for bishop d3. Bishop d3 is probably not the best move for white because of the d4 pawn. And I've tried to refute this, more or less. And I've just decided to give you the computer recommendation here. So we could try to make use of the d4 pawn, but the computer actually suggests bishop e6. And the idea is to attack c4. So white has basically two ways to deal with that, by playing b3 or by playing d5. And if white plays d5, then we're going to play bishop d7. And play is very easy for us after this, because we're going to play knight a6, rook c8, target c4, and maybe put the knight here or here. We're just going to focus on c4. And the computer really likes this idea. And yeah, I don't think bishop d3 will be a move you will see regularly. But I did think that I should, think that I should have mentioned it at the very least. So d5, bishop d7. And if white plays b3, then we're going to play d5, c5. If not, then we are perfectly fine. And now knight d7. And funnily enough, white is actually struggling already, because the best move for white is actually to play the awkward bishop b2. And the bishop is very awkwardly placed on b2. So it's basically in an eternal pin at the moment. And the bishop has much better squares somewhere around there. So the bishop is actually pretty badly placed there. Sometimes I tell my students to count how many squares they have. And this one has currently got 2. So it's not the best piece for the moment. And it might take some time to get the piece active again. So as compared to, for example, on f4, how many squares does the bishop have there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So yeah, it should be clear where the bishop wants to be. Yeah. So if we can force the bishop to b2, that's kind of a victory for us. So knight c6, bishop c2 to protect d4, and now with b6 we have about equal chances. It's a very double-edged position, I would say. But at least we don't have. We're not the only one with problems. We still have to get the bishop active somehow. But ideas could be rook c8 to target pieces on the c file, and we are simply more than fine. So yeah, bishop d3 is therefore not the most challenging. I did like very much the bishop e6 idea. Other moves were interesting to look at, but bishop d3 had a little bit more venom than I expected, and therefore bishop e6 looks like a very clean answer to this to this position. So now, but once again, it's not likely that you will face bishop d3. They almost always play bishop e3 or bishop e2. So all right, now for the main course of this video, just to move bishop e3. So after bishop e3, I want to play knight c6. And here white has a bunch of extra options. and most notably the moves rook c1 and the move queen d2. And those were extra moves that I didn't know about before making this whole Alekhine course. And I got really confused about the different types and the different orders of moves here. But I figured it out, and I can show to you what the difference is exactly. So let's have a look. First of all, before rook c1 and queen e2, there were a few other moves that could be played as well. For example, bishop d3. Once again, it could also be played in this position. Now we once again want to play d5, c5, knight c4. And after bishop takes, d takes, short castle. Here we could transpose to a previous chapter with the move bishop f5. But here we actually have an extra option with the move b6, which is actually good enough as well for equality. But bishop f5 works perfectly as well for black. We actually transposed to the previous chapter. So, yeah. Let me mention the move bishop e2 as well. And now after d5, c5, knight c4, we most likely transpose once again to the previous chapter. After white takes and plays short castle. So, a separate value has b3. b3 is a prophylactic move once again, and now obviously we cannot play d5, c5, and knight c4 anymore. So we need to think of something else. And I like the move f5 in this case. It's rare that it works, but usually it's kind of weakening for the king side. But in this case, I think it works quite nicely. d5 is still okay, funnily enough. In this case, with the idea that after c5, knight d7, knight takes c5, we still win the pawn back. And but the line which I did not like here was that if white simply grabs the piece here, d takes c5. Bishop takes a1, queen takes a1, queen takes d5. We won the exchange, but we've lost one of our biggest pieces on g7 at this point. So, and it turns out that this position is kind of complicated still, because after bishop c4, queen h5, king e2, exclamation mark, white actually has tremendous compensation for the exchange, and I wasn't comfortable recommending this line. Although objectively this is still fine, I think that we have some hurdles to jump over in this particular position. So, yeah, this is the reason why I didn't want to recommend d5, this particular exchange sacrifice. Objectively, it's still fine, but it scares me a bit, so that's why I went for f5. Now, e5 is fine too, and after d5, knight e7, we have the extra option of knight f5 at this point. But I like to play f5 first, actually. And if white plays queen d2 to prevent f4, now we can play e5, and we have a very nice play, in my opinion. Black. f5 is a move we wanted to play anyways. We're threatening f4. And both e4 and f4 are ideas in this position for black. So, but you can choose if you want to go for d5 in this position or e5, then I have included that in the files if you want to have a look. So that's b3. Let's dive into the main problem. So I think I want to start first with rook c1, which is the main line in this case. But I wanted to start with this because in both queen d2 and rook c1, I wanted to recommend the move d5. And after rook c1, it's actually okay to play d5. Here it works. And I'll show you why. So why is rook c1 and queen e2 a problem, you might ask, first of all. What's the idea? Why? What's the point? Well, the point is that after c5, knight c4, yes, we are attacking the bishop, but the smart thing that white has done is white did not move the bishop yet. So white can take on c4 immediately. Notice, by the way, on knight takes d5, this trick backfires for white, because after knight takes c3, the knight needs to take back. We win the pawn and our bishop is fantastic on g7. So this little trick is actually a mistake for white at this point. If white allows us to take on e3, we are much better again. We have seen this idea before. So white needs to take on c4. He takes c4 and now short castle. So we have a position which is very similar to the position from the previous chapter, only there's a rook on c1. Extra for white. And in this case, that matters. Because if we played bishop f5, queen a4, bishop d3, rook fd1, now our usual moves don't work anymore. Because if we play queen e8, the rook on c1 makes sure that the knight on c3 is protected. So now white actually has to move b3. And we're not in time to make things complicated, because after e5, d5, e4, which I recommended in my previous chapter, d takes, c takes, and this pawn suddenly white's completely winning, and that's all because the knight on c3 is protected by the rook on c1. That's the difference here. And I've tried to make another move work, like knight d4 in the previous chapter was an option here as well. But after take, b takes c4, white simply wins the pawn in the end. So, more or less, I wanted to make this work for black to make things easy. But instead, bishop f5 simply is not good at this position. And here comes another point of confusion, because the computer did say it was okay for black. But we need to play b6 here. And okay, so I started analyzing b6. And b6 is actually okay for us. Yeah, because if white plays queen a4 again, then we can take on d4, because after taking rook fd1, come on, we take the pawn on c5. And so we have won at this point 2 pawns, and white will win the pawn back after queen takes c4. But we have a perfectly okay position now, because our pieces are well placed. Even if we lose the pawn, materials equal after that. And all our pieces will have good squares pretty soon. The rooks can come to the center. b2 might become a target at some point. So this position is fine for black. And so you could ask then, why did I not recommend this if this is still okay for black? Well, I made it an alternative, or a clickable variation if you want to go over the files. Because there was still something that was concerning to me, and that's simply that the position still felt difficult. Like, after queen a4, knight takes, bishop takes, white can play moves like c6, followed by knight b5. And that is okay if you know what to do. So I think my recommendation here was actually bishop takes c3, rook takes c3, bishop e6. Both players have good pawns, one on c4 and one on c6. And it should be about equal. So this position should still be okay for black. Bishop takes e3 here is fine too. You can take a look at the files for that one. I don't know, it felt more complicated than the other option, which I wanted to show you. All right, so there's much more information on this in the clickable. I was so interested in the files. I was so interested in this that I basically made half a chapter out of this on it. One more thing I need to mention is that why do we play b6? Well, if white takes, a takes, the c4 pawn is more or less protected because we can protect it with our bishop on a6. And then we even have ideas connected with knight b4 and knight d3 to grab the initiative. So a move perhaps to remember if you want to incorporate this in your repertoire. But let's take a look now at what I'm recommending. There was another point which I forget to. Let me check. There was a point which I'm forgetting. I got it. Yep. Thank you for the wait. After b6, there is one dangerous move that still actually needs to be addressed, and that's the move d5. And in this position, it's okay for us because we have knight b4, and then we attack the rook on c1 immediately. And that's why d5 is okay. I mean, that's why d5 here is okay against rook c1, but it's not okay against queen d2. And I'll get to queen e2 in a little bit. Yeah. All right. Enough explaining. What is my recommendation against rook c1? So d5 works, but I figured that we can throw rook c1 and queen e2 in the same pile by playing the move e5. And the reason why I like e5 is that, well, the king is still in the center for white. We're trying to break open the center, as we should. If your opponent is underdeveloped, the king is still in the center, you want to actually open the center very often. So I like how principled the move e5 is in this case. Yeah, so what are moves? d5 is a move, and d takes e5 are the best moves. So let's take a look at both of them. Let's start with d takes e5. We could take with the pawn back, but I think knight takes e5 is nice and clean in this case. And white, we're attacking c4 as well, so I've included two lines here. I can take or play b3. If b3, then in almost all our cases actually, the point is that we want to play bishop e6 and d5 always. And the fun thing is that white cannot prevent that at all. So we're basically equalizing in almost all variations from this point. Bishop e2, d5. If white gets greedy with queen takes b7, d5 is extra dangerous because white will have even more or less development. Yeah. All right. So let me show you knight takes e5 here as well. Bishop takes e5. We still want to play bishop e6 and d5 on the next move. So I've included 3 lines, but let me show you queen d2, which is kind of clever because after bishop e6, knight b5 is a very nice idea. Because if white plays b3, then we have d5 with no problems. So knight b5, the idea is to cover the d4 square. So if we play d5, white can play c5 now. And now if our knight moves back, white has control over the d4 square and actually a pretty good position. But we can play knight c4 instead. And after taking, we actually have no problems whatsoever. And I think that the position is roughly equal because white always has the chance to play knight d6, which was actually also played in a game, coincidentally. In the game, something else happened, but I wanted to recommend b6, just to target the defender for the knights. And after knight takes, queen takes, king takes, bishop f6. We did sacrifice a pawn, but we get fantastic compensation in return. I've clicked around in this position and I felt very comfortable that we can hold this. Because all these pawns are weak. And white can hardly defend all of them. For example, c takes b6, what if white continues taking pawns? A takes, and well, if white takes the pawn, then we can take this one, and then the whole queen side collapses. And since the king is still in the center, white is not out of the woods yet. So white cannot take more pawns. White needs to play b4. Wow, I hope I'm not confusing you with my clicking. I'm trying to, yeah, okay, b4, just protecting c5 and yeah, making sure that things are stable on the queen side. But after taking with the pawn, rook c8, the funny thing is, I checked this, is that white cannot hold on to the pawn most likely, because we will play rook c6 here, and bishop e7, and since the pawn is also under attack, and we have rook a6 as well as an option, white actually cannot keep his advantage. White will lose the pawns, and then most likely a draw will happen. So yeah, I figured that b6 is nice. It's probably not the only way to equalize here, but I thought it was a nice pawn sacrifice. Yeah, probably not necessary, but anyway, after d takes, we play knight takes, and then we try to push for d5. Very simple. And yeah, I probably clicked too much. Okay, so let's move over to another move here, which is d5. So d5, since the rook is on c1, knight a5 is not an option, since white can play b3, and then we have two very bad knights on the rim. So after d5, we need to put the knight back to e7. And I always like when this happens. This was actually an old game of 1994 in Tilburg, the Netherlands. That's how you pronounce it. I know, I'm from the Netherlands. And the game continued bishop e2. So we want to play knight f5. And if white prevented that with g4, then we play f5, and we are going to start counterattacking. Very rich position. It's just a lot of fun to play from both, or well, maybe not from both. I like to play this from the black side at the very least. I have indicated some ideas with arrows here, but in general, a very complicated position. So in the game happened bishop e2. I played knight f5, and here white tried to save the dark red bishop by playing bishop g5. And this was played between Serper and Yermolinsky in 1994 Tilburg, two grandmasters. And here my improvement over that game is actually to play f6. So normally you wouldn't want this, but since we can play f5 very quickly afterwards, I think this is fine for us. Yeah, so the game could continue bishop d2. Here I like rook e8, aim for e4, and after bishop d3, preventing that, I like the move knight h6. And the idea is to put a knight on f7, play f5, threaten e4, and at some point maybe we need to reroute this knight as well to a better square. But in general, with our mobile pawns on the king side and in the center, I think this is a fun position to play. So that is my recommendation for rook c1. If you are more comfortable with the, let's go back, click, 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 with the d5 move here, then that's perfectly okay too. After rook c1, d5 works. So you have an option here. Right, so that's my explanation for rook c1. Now let's move on to the other interesting move, which is queen d2. Now keep in mind, all of these moves are actually more rarely played than the previous chapter with bishop e3 and bishop e2 combined. So these are just extra options that you might come across. but they are much less likely to occur than the bishop e3 and bishop e2. At least according to statistics, which show that bishop e3 and bishop e2 is much more played. So, but okay, computers, right? We need to check computer lines as well. Queen e2 is one of them. So here I'm recommending e5, but again, I need to explain what happens after d5. So what happens there? And I need to tell a story because queen e2, funnily enough, I got this against me 22 years ago when I was 11 years old. Yes, you know now how old I am. But that was really funny for me to realize that I've played this position already when I was 11. I knew that I played the Alekhine in my teens. My teacher back then showed me how to play this opening. Ever since I grew a love for it, for the opening. And I was hoping to recommend what I played 22 years ago, but unfortunately I cannot recommend that. I played bishop f5. And my opponent here should have probably played g4, bishop d7, and bishop h6. And this position kind of scared me with long castle coming and an initiative on the king's side most likely. So I did not want to recommend this move, although objectively it seems fine. It seems like an interesting move as well. So yeah. So instead I needed to find something else. You can already guess that e5 is my recommendation here, but let's go over once again the d5 move here. What's the difference this time, right? Well, if c5, knight c4 takes, white once again did not make the extra move bishop e2, so that's good for white. D takes should castle, and here, if we play bishop f5, then we once again have lost a valuable tempo set, so that doesn't work again. But the move b6 might still work here, since after c takes, we can play bishop a6 again. Since after c takes b6 and we take back, then we once again have the bishop a6 idea to protect our c4 pawn. But here white has d5, and this is the difference with the rook c1 move. That after d5, we usually want to play knight b4, but we are not in time to make things complicated this time because the rook on c1 is not there. And knight d3 is less strong because of that. That's the reason why d5 does work with rook c1, but it doesn't work for queen d2. Summarized. So let's go back. And because d5 doesn't work here, I felt like rook c1, we could have a nice congruent chapter by playing e5 here as well, for rook c1 as well. So e5, once again, a very decent move. If white plays, where to start? Long castle, just ignoring the tension in the center. Then we can play queen e7, since white, I like queen e7 because, well, there are more or less threats in the center, and we don't want to take here because then white simply takes back and has a positional advantage because of the weak d6 pawn. But queen e7 looks good. We keep the tension, and then we try to play f5, and once again we have a very complicated and fun position for both sides. I don't know. I would love to try this position out with black, and maybe even with white. It looks like fun for both colors. So yeah. If white takes on e5, then in this case, I think I like d takes e5 better, since I didn't include the reason, but knight takes e5 I did not recommend, but I don't know why exactly this is not good anymore. My guess is that After knight takes, bishop takes. We want to play bishop e6 and d5, but white's in time to castle, and then with the rook on the d file, it's really hard to play d5. That's my guess at this point. The other reason could be that after d takes e5, queens are most likely going to get traded, and white already moved the queen. So that's a good thing. So after d takes e5, white has a few moves. Queen takes d8 first of all. Rook takes d8 and c5. Looks like a very logical move to play, since our knight will be kicked back most likely. But we have the extremely nice move knight b4 in between. If we move back or to d5, then white has a very nice positional position here. Positional position. Yeah. But knight b4, we're counterattacking. We want to put a knight to c2 if we have the chance. And white needs to defend against that with rook c1. And now we're going to play knight d5. And the difference now is that if white takes, we take back with the knight, and most likely we're going to get the bishop there. And then we have an advantage actually in the ending. So, knight b4, move to remember, because c5 is almost very likely going to get played in this position. Yeah. Alright, so what happens if white plays c5 immediately, you might wonder. Because now we don't have knight b4. Well, now we have another exquisite move, which is e4. And now after taking, queen takes, knight f takes d2, we can actually move the knight forward once again to a4. And now we will win the b2 pawn in return. So in both cases, we're going to get our knights active, and we're not going to be pushed backwards by this e4 move and this knight b4 move. Yeah, I like this a lot. So d takes e5 is actually not the best in my opinion because of d takes e5 and the shenanigans that I just showed you. But d5 is a very solid approach here. Just closing things up, castle long, attack. And now once again we get a very double-edged position after knight e7. If white castles now, then knight f5 gives us the dark squared bishop, so probably white should avoid this. By the way, a tactic, if bishop g5, f6, bishop h4, we could take, but we can also simply win the queen. Not too bad either. So yeah, probably white should actually not allow knight f5 here and play g4 instead. But after f5, we once again have tremendous counterplay in this position already. So just to finish up, if white plays long castle, which happened in a game, I liked the move bishop d7 here as an improvement over a game played in 1997. And I wanted to give a small explanation here, is that it's good to keep the pawns together and play f4 or e4 whenever you see a good chance. Because right now, both have kind of drawbacks at the moment. If we play f4, then taking, and white has a very nice square on e4, and suddenly our bishop is blocked on g7, and it's hard to get some counterplay going. So that is something that that's why I like to move bishop d7 a bit better here. With the idea to play rook c8, maybe knight f4 at some point, if white allows us, and play e4 and f4 in a more opportune time. Yeah, but in both cases, both rook c1, e5, and queen e2, e5, play becomes double-edged, I would say, because both players have chances there. And it hasn't been played that often. I need to mention that as well. This whole chapter, all the lines that I've just shown you, those are variations which aren't played very often still. Yet, queen d2 and rook c1 could very well be played in the future. as everybody has access to engines nowadays. And these two moves are, quite difficult from a logical perspective as well. It's actually also kind of a human move because queen e2 and rook c1 both save white a tempo by not playing bishop e2 here, which makes a lot of sense. So, yeah, this chapter confused me a lot, but I think I figured it out, and I hope you found the conclusions I drew satisfactory as well. Otherwise, I did make a lot of analysis on the d5 available for you in the files. So if you want to have a deeper look, you can. Right, that's it for this chapter. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.